Welcome to Biohacking with Brittany. Thank you for tuning in to another episode. This is a place where I talk about health and wellness and my own personal journey and everything like that. Shout out to all of the people who have been sending me DMs lately about their own personal health journey. I got quite a few of you messaging me after my most recent episode that was a Q&A where I kind of just went through a bunch of different questions and talked about where I'm at mentally, physically, my health-wise. But we also talked about things like birth control and psychedelics and plant medicine. And a lot of you actually were interested in the relationship between birth control and plant medicine, as if like you were going to be taking them at the same time. And I thought that was very interesting. So I'm going to do a deeper dive into that and into this idea of plant medicine being used at different times during a woman's life. I know there are some women out there who also talk about microdosing with psilocybin during postpartum and even during pregnancy. And this is something that I'm very curious about. So I will do an episode on this. I might try to find an expert to bring on, but I'm also just going to take a look at the different research and see what other people are saying, because I do think we are kind of moving towards this dialogue of using plant medicine in a way that is not necessarily what you would traditionally think it would be used for. So kind of what I've seen in terms of postpartum is that women are microdosing with psilocybin, usually psilocybin, in a way to support their mental health during that difficult time. So whether it's to alleviate anxiety or depression, or just for an elevated mood and helping with stress management. And I kind of love this. I think that, I think I want to dive into this because I'm just so curious what other people are saying about it. And then I'm also really curious about this on prenatal mental health. And I actually had somebody else reach out and say, hey, in the future, if you could do a full episode on prenatal mental health, that would be amazing, because so much of the dialogue and of the current conversation looks at postpartum. But this woman in my DMs was saying it's actually very difficult in pregnancy in itself, not even postpartum yet, in terms of anxiety, depression, stress, of all of it. And I'm definitely not an expert in that space, but I will bring on someone who is an expert or do the research myself to be able to talk about it. / one day when I am pregnant, I'm sure I will talk about it just to provide a real, example of what it is like to go through that. Because I could only imagine how complicated it is. Honestly, how complicated it is and how everyone looks so different going through that time. So stay tuned for those episodes. Those are some topics that I've written down that I definitely want to pull on in the future. And one of my favorite podcasts that I listen to is called Almost 30. And one of the hosts, Lindsay, she just had her baby, which was amazing to see. She just posted him on Instagram. And this is really interesting because I always find it interesting to see how people announce a baby, when they say it, what they say, and how much they show of their kids. And I think it's really special when people kind of take time for themselves and don't overshare. I think that's really important. And I think she did that really well. So shout out if she's listening to this episode. I just think it's, really inspirational for her to do. And if you haven't listened to Almost 30, that is probably the podcast I've listened to the most in all of my life. I started listening to Almost 30 before I was 30. That's for sure. Probably 5 years ago. And it was actually, it was during a time when I really needed to hear that type of podcast. I spent a year traveling and I was in New Zealand for a long time, and I didn't have a lot of community or a lot of friends or anything like that. And I was working online. So the opportunity to meet people was actually low as well. And this was pre-pandemic. And it was so special to be able to listen to those two women have different discussions about health and wellness and self-care and self-love. And it was really helpful during that time. And it was actually one of the inspirations for me to start my own podcast was that podcast. That's a little insider tip if you want to listen to a different podcast other than mine. And I hope that I can be that shining light for other people. So if you are thinking about starting a podcast, I hope my podcast inspires you to do so. If you are on a health and wellness journey, which we all kind of are, I hope my podcast kind of guides you in a way and opens your eyes to different resources and opportunities and brands and products and services out there that you might not hear about. That's kind of the point, is to be an inspiration in this space. And today is very much aligned with that. I am diving deep into cellular health today and everything that has to do with longevity and aging and repairing the cells and how do we create clean, healthy cells. And this is such a massive topic. I feel like longevity in general has become so popular in the last 2 years or so. Like, I don't remember ever talking about longevity 5 years ago. I don't remember really seeing it much in the podcast space or on social media. But now it seems like everyone cares. Everyone cares about studying how you are aging on a cellular basis and what can we do about that in terms of reversing the clock, reducing damage, because, and like we get into in this episode, your cellular health and how fast you age really is a marker for disease that can come in the future. So I'm excited about this space. I'm definitely excited about this space. And this episode was with Mimio. I love the team at Mimio. They are so smart and informative and really just on the ball with longevity. We talk about a lot in this episode, to be honest. We talk about everything from kind of what I was saying, longevity, cellular health. We also talk about the supplement industry and how it can be overwhelming knowing what supplements to take and what not to take. And also we talk about the environment and how damaging a lot of health brands and products are to the environment in terms of packaging. And I love, and I talk about this in the episode, but one of the things that I love about Mimio is that they have a refillable option for their supplements. And I rarely see this. I have so many supplements. If you came to my house, I would walk you to my closet that is filled with cardboard boxes. Inside these cardboard boxes are supplements that are categorized. There's like a longevity box. There's all of my like feminine, like female ones, like prenatals and stuff like that. Then I have my proteins and all these things. And it is very rare to find a company that says, hey, we're going to send you this one bottle. When you run out, I'm just going to send you this refillable pouch. You take the pouch, you pour it into the bottle, and then you recycle that pouch, and that's it. And that is so smart compared to a plastic bottle coming every single month, every 3 months, whatever it might be. So I'm really hoping I kind of see this more. And if you're listening to this episode and you work for a supplement company, I really encourage you to look into this way of doing it. This makes me feel like I can trust you more as a brand and as a company when I see that your values incorporate the environment. And we, especially as biohackers, especially as wellness enthusiasts, we are so much for nature. And so when you value nature just as much as we do, it just makes me want to buy your product more. So I really encourage you to look into doing this. If Mimio is doing it, that means it's possible. That means you could figure it out. You can get the pouches and you can do it as well. And just really show your love for the environment in a good way, because we don't want to be filling landfills with your plastic bottles. Okay. That is too much. And I don't like that. And so enjoy this podcast episode. There are so many golden nuggets in this. We do a deep dive on longevity and cellular health. I think you are going to love it. A shout out to some of my favorite brands. AG1. I'm heading to California this weekend. I'm going for a week. And you better believe that I'm bringing AG1 with me. AG1, they have the individual packets that you can use that is filled with a powder that has a bunch of different minerals and vitamins and enzymes in it. I actually love the taste of AG1. It makes me feel like I'm making like a very healthy choice. It's very I don't want to say earthy, but it kind of is a little earthy, but in a good way. So I love doing this. My older brother actually loves AG1. He's always messaging me about it, asking how much he should take, when he should take it, all of my recommendations. And so I love using AG1 and definitely check it out. They are linked on my website and in my show notes. And a shout out to Biooptimizers, another brand I will be bringing with me on my trip. I actually just emailed them. They actually came out with a couple new products. So they have a new stress product, which I'm going to try, especially because I am feeling stressed in my life right now. And I think I could use something like that. And this is a very holistic product. So I'm excited to take a look at that. And I also use their digestive enzymes. So I will 100% be bringing those with me because I am going to go out for a nice birthday dinner. We're going to get wine, which will be my first time drinking in over 3 months. So I am definitely bringing all of the digestion support with me on my trip while I can. And last but not least, shout out to Fatty 15. This is a new essential fatty acid that has been found, which is mind blowing. If you haven't listened to the podcast I did with Fatty 15 last week, listen to that right now. You are going to learn so much. Fatty 15, they found this essential fatty acid through studying dolphins. The story behind this product is unbelievable, but it really just goes to show that science is always evolving and the research is always changing. And so honestly, our products should change as well. And Fatty 15 is interesting because after I did that podcast interview, I actually stopped focusing as much on my omegas that I was taking. And now I just take the Fatty 15 product because this essential fatty acid is actually more effective than omega-3, which is crazy. So listen to that podcast episode. We dive deep into this, and it's really important to listen to it because then you'll be able to understand it much better than me just explaining it right now in this couple of minutes. So enjoy this podcast episode with Mimio. I love their team. I love everything that they're doing. They are honestly leading the way in longevity, in my opinion, instead of looking at single ingredients and saying, hey, take this one supplement with this one ingredient. They have a very holistic approach that looks at different ingredients that you can combine together to be more effective. And I think this is smart. I think we're going to start to see more of this in the coming years as we understand aging better. So enjoy this episode, and I will catch you next week for another one. I'm going to California for a week. So message me if you have any questions or need advice about your health. I'm also here for that. And thank you for listening. Welcome to Biohacking with Brittany. I am so thrilled that you are tuning in for this episode today. We are diving into all things aging, longevity, and I have Dr. Chris Rhodes with me from Mimio, and Mimio is a new company that I have recently been looking into in the last few months that specializes in this space. So Dr. Chris Rhodes, welcome to the show.
Hey, Brittany. I'm so glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yes. And right before we hopped on this, you were telling me about your previous TikTok career, which is something that is honestly very rare. Like, it's pretty rare that I have a doctor come on the show who's also a CEO who also understands TikTok, let alone has over 140,000 followers. So like, how did you go from TikTok influencer to like starting this company?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really great question. So yeah, they're definitely all tied together. So at the time when I started getting into TikTok, I was a graduate student at UC Davis in nutritional biochemistry. So really just like making my entire career and my entire scientific journey essentially about studying how nutrition impacts longevity, human health, and just learning all of the ins and outs about it, especially at the biochemical kind of molecular cellular level. And TikTok was really blowing up at the time. It was around COVID times, right? So people were, number one, very concerned about their health, but then number two, like kind of hunkered down, just like really engaging with TikTok as a new platform. But on the platform, there was just, as there is everywhere, a bunch of bad nutritional information, right? Like, veering way more into like, what's the trend of the week? And, how can I incorporate alkaline water into my diet so that I can deacidify my blood and like weird stuff like that. And I kind of was like, all right, I think that I, as a a PhD in nutrition, can really step in here and kind of make things a bit more fun for people, relatable for people, while also being very scientific. So that's kind of how I hopped into the space. I really wanted to educate people around these are the nutrition facts, right, and not the nutrition myths that are kind of propagating around the internet. And that just really resonated with people. And of course, it was the early days of TikTok. You could be a lot more authentic and unpolished then. So me screaming about nutrition to my mirror was acceptable at the time.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I love a lot of the content that you posted. And I love that you just felt this calling to really educate people in a scientific way, because it's actually very difficult to do that in a 30-second video. It is really difficult to make it catchy and punchy and explain it so that somebody actually gets it, but also have it rooted in science. And that is no easy task. So kudos to you for nailing that. For sure.
Yeah, I know. These lucky kids nowadays coming on to the later days of TikTok where it's yes, by all means, make a 5-minute video, make a 7-minute video, right? And that was 60 was the max back when I was doing it. Yeah, and I had to be rapid fire, super talker to fit all of that in there. And, I was kind of a perfectionist about it because I wanted to make sure that I was being accurate 100% of the time, giving people all that information, and then also condensing that information into a 60-second time frame that also had jokes. So it was it was a balancing act for sure. And to give you an inside peek of that, usually, a 60-second video, how long could it take, right? But usually it would take me, something in the range of an hour to actually shoot the thing, just because it was number one, I'm not actually very good at shooting video. I do a lot of takes because I'm again, very perfectionistic. But yeah, it was just it was a long slog for a lot of those videos, but it was just it was a really fun time.
Nice. Yeah, I get that. I create a lot of content and people have no idea how long it takes. And it's not just the filming, it's the editing and it's putting it together, and it's all of it. It actually, that 30 seconds or 60 seconds can actually take hours to create. And that's just kind of the reality of it. If you're making authentic, good content, that's not, AI generated at this point. But yeah,
that's which is a whole new world.
Yes, it is such a new world. There's good and bad to it. But anyway, we won't go down that rabbit hole. I am so curious because you did a lot of research on fasting and longevity, which was kind of the forefront that pushed you into developing Mimio and everything that Mimio is and is becoming. So what was your research that you did that really sparked this idea of creating some sort of supplement that was superior to what is on the market?
Yeah, absolutely. And so, to give you a backstory into, Mimio and me, right? So Mimio Health is a nutritechnology company that is making first of their kind biomimetic supplements. And, essentially what that means is that we are studying actual human biology in order to study, decode, and then recreate what happens in our body in these interesting, regenerative states. And the first one that we looked at was fasting. And that's what Mimio is. Essentially, it's a biomimetic supplement that was designed from clinical fasting research to recreate what actually happens in your body during a 36-hour fast to give you, the benefits of a longer term fast, but in a more convenient format and on demand. And how this all came about, right, was I got my BS in biochemistry from Loyola Marymount University down in LA. But then a lot of college kids got out, didn't really know what I wanted to do. So I took a 2-year immunology fellowship at Stanford, where I just kind of started pouring through all the research that I could get my hands on, trying to figure out what interested me. And eventually came across healthy aging and longevity research, because that was just something that was immensely fascinating to me. This thing that used to be just myth and legend, like Ponce de Leon and the Fountain of Youth, all that stuff, that is now this very, very active and very, very legitimate area of scientific research, making these great strides forward. And the longevity is one of those problems where if you solve longevity, you kind of solve everything else at the same time, right? Because by and large, except for special cases, young people don't really get sick, and until those kind of degenerative and declining effects of age happen, that's kind of when things get out of whack and disease really starts to pop up. So when you're in the health and longevity space, eventually you come across fasting, right? Because it's one of the only ways that we know of right now to reliably extend lifespan in model organisms. And in that same vein, as we were talking about before, it helps to treat, prevent, or delay most major diseases at the same time. Over like 100,000 studies with fasting have shown that. So it's kind of this one thing that does everything. And even beyond that, it does all of that without adding anything into the system, right? So it's not this superfood or this wonder drug, but it's actually somehow activating this, longevity bio program that we already have inside of us, but just isn't ordinarily turned on because it needs to be activated by fasting. And when that kind of clicked for me, I got mad about it, to be honest, because I was like, oh, great. So my body has, the ability to live to be 120 years old in perfect health, but it's just not doing it. So I was very much like, okay, I need to figure out what is happening inside the human body during a fast that could be activating all of these beneficial effects and find a way to recreate that. So that's kind of what I dedicated my PhD in nutritional biology at Davis on, is really studying human fasting and finding a way to recreate it.
Nice. I love that. I actually think it was so interesting how you're talking about how fasting has such a significant impact on longevity, because from a standpoint of a business, you can't necessarily make fasting a consumable product, right? And so I just wonder if that's maybe why it's not actually recommended more. Like there's no government recommendations that are like, hey, be healthier and fast, right? It's all about like, hey, drink this almond milk and let's go plant-based. And there's all of these like mixed people involved with, hidden agendas and stuff like that. But if fasting is truly one of the biggest things that can increase our health span and not necessarily just our lifespan, which there is a difference between those things, I just wonder why we don't have more people in higher up positions recommending it. And especially when these are supposed to be the people and organizations that we trust as a population.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And I mean, in that vein, I would definitely say that fasting is this really great intervention. And you can see like in the clinical studies with fasting that have been done, there have been great health effects. Projecting the effects that we see in animal models is always going to be really difficult, to translate up into human organisms, right? So especially when we're talking about something like lifespan extension, I don't think a government is ever really going to make a recommendation for fasting because there's just not that longitudinal, enough study that's been done or that's going to be done in the future. And then, there are just a lot of populations that fasting, might not be good for, right? If you are a type 1 diabetic or, some of the people who could actually, benefit the most from it, like the elderly, already have problems with getting enough nutrition or problems with sarcopenia or frailty, where fasting just like might not be the right approach for them. So it's not a one size fit all solution by any means. One thing that's big right now, especially in, the social media spaces and the like TikTok, is that recommendations about fasting can even, trigger some people who have eating disorders or to develop an eating disorder, right? So there's definitely considerations to go into fasting. But personally, when you look at it just from the scientific point of view, it's really unambiguous in terms of whether or not fasting can be beneficial and whether or not even just changing around meal timing and not just, absolute calories can have these very powerful and beneficial effects. Because, and I think that we'll get into this a little bit later, there are these universal responses and these obligate responses that happen inside of a human body during a fast that really activate a lot of these, beneficial effects that someone who's kind of in a chronically fed state just won't experience.
My next partner I want to talk about is athletic greens. So I take AG1 by Athletic Greens literally every single day. And I first gave AG1 a try when I was traveling to Costa Rica. I really wanted something to support my gut health, boost my energy, keep my immune system in check, and really just support me while I was traveling and not home. I quickly fell in love with it. And now that I'm back in Canada, I still take it every single day. And I take it in the morning before I have any type of coffee. Typically, it's like the first thing I have in the morning. And it makes me feel just fantastic. I feel like I'm starting my day off on the right foot. I feel like I'm covering all of my nutrition needs right from the get-go, which is super important and such a healthier way to start than just having coffee on an empty stomach right away. So I'm just obsessed with taking it. And if you want to take ownership of your health, today is a good time to start. Athletic Greens is giving you a free, 1-year supply of vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase. So those are the same travel packs that I took when I was flying. Go to athleticgreens.com/biohacking with Brittany. That's athleticgreens.com/biohacking with Brittany to check it out today. It's also linked in my show notes and on my website everywhere. Yeah, I agree with you. I think it's good that there's more content and dialogue around who fasting is for and who it isn't for, because like you said, like it can be damaging to some people, and we really do need to be careful about it being triggering, I guess, in a way. But it's also like how, like you said, like how do we get the benefits of fasting? Like how do we prevent disease further through taking a supplement or doing something that is not necessarily fasting, but gets the benefits from that? And so that's how you kind of transitioned into Mimio and creating Mimio, was through this idea of let's take these benefits and let's look at the compounds that I guess trigger it, and let's put it into a supplement. Is it kind of like it just went like that and then you combine them and you made Mimio, or kind of like walk us through, I guess, the thinking behind that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, the intention behind the study was actually never to create a supplement. It was just to kind of understand what was going on. This was something that I thought that was going to be like way more of a like lifetime career kind of goal rather than it kind of ended up to be. So what we ended up doing, what my research was about, we took healthy young people, men and women, in an equal distribution, because we wanted to make sure that we were avoiding a gender bias, especially when, trying to understand fundamental human biology. We had them come in a baseline state, took their samples, and then had them fast for 36 hours and took their samples again. And we assessed what's called their plasma functionalities. So essentially, the ability of their plasma to induce various cellular effects. And what we found was that after a 36-hour fast, people's plasma functionalities were really enhanced. So their plasma became more anti-inflammatory, it became more antioxidant, cellular protective, it became more cardioprotective, and obviously the metabolic markers and parameters were like way more in healthy ranges, right? And that's really, really interesting, right? When you're already taking young, healthy people, you put them under a single nutritional intervention that can essentially take them from, healthy even more healthy, these kind of like optimized functionalities. That's really, really interesting, especially in the nutrition space. So we wanted to figure out, okay, what's going on here? What's the difference between the baseline state of plasma and the fasted state of plasma? So we did what's called comprehensive metabolomics, basically looking at all of the small molecule compounds in the plasma. And what we found was that during a 36-hour fast, there were these unique sets of metabolites that were elevated, that were only elevated during a fast. And when we combed through that list, looking for ones that already had some literature on them about being bioactive in some way, whether that was being able to induce those anti-inflammatory effects or upregulate autophagy or things like that, we narrowed that list down to around a dozen, and then screened through each of those using our ex vivo modeling techniques with these cellular assays. And we found that there was this synergistic combination of 4 of those molecules that when we, gave them back to human cells, we could recreate these same beneficial effects that we saw from the fasted plasma. So they could recreate those anti-inflammatory, antioxidant, cardioprotective effects. And because, this was also a longevity, minded study, right? We were like, all right, let's see if these molecules that are recreating these beneficial effects of fasting in cells can also extend lifespan in model organisms. So we did a C. elegans lifespan analysis and found that supplementation with the Mimio formulation, those 4 fasting metabolites could extend lifespan in C. elegans by 96%. No caloric restriction, no fasting required. So just normal eating conditions and just with supplementation. And to kind of put that into context for people who, might not really, know about the lifespan extension data, rapamycin, which is a super popular like anti-aging drug right now, in that same model, that gives C. elegans like a 19% lifespan extension, or metformin, right? Same kind of thing that gives, C. elegans a 36% lifespan extension. So you have this combination of these natural human molecules that are already present in your body, super safe, and very interestingly bioactive, combining together to outperform these like anti-aging drugs. So it was like a very, very like remarkable discovery. And that's kind of what led to the foundation of Mimio, is that we could take these molecules that would ordinarily, only be elevated during a 36 hours fast, give them back to people as a daily supplement to, recreate fasting at the molecular level and activate those same benefits of those molecules, but without actually needing to fast to elevate them.
Yeah. Wow. It's so interesting. Part of me is like 2 things. One, I wonder why only 4 out of the 12, when put together, made that difference. Like, why would it not be all 12 together, like synergistically really elevated it? Like, is my first thought. And my second thought is, how come no one else has discovered this yet? Right? If it makes that much of a difference in terms of percentage wise compared to taking these molecules individually, like, why did it take us so long to kind of figure this out?
Yeah, great question. So to the first point, why don't these things necessarily all work synergistically together? It's not necessarily that they don't. So the way that we were assessing for their cumulative benefits was we looked at each of the molecules individually and then compared those molecules back to ketone bodies, actually, as like, can they outperform ketone bodies at lower concentrations? And what we found was that 4 of the 12 molecules that we were looking at actually could do that. So they could outperform ketone bodies at creating these anti-inflammatory effects at anywhere between 100x to 100,000x lower concentrations. So those were the molecules that we really started to look at. And then when we, combine them together, that's where we found that, yes, they're really activating, these complementary pathways. Because sometimes when you have different bioactive molecules, they can be working through the same pathway and actually end up competing with each other, or activating, competing pathways, right, that push things in the opposite direction. So you can kind of get this their saturation effect that's happening, or this, balance and counterbalance effect that's happening. So these molecules, these 4 together, activate these different complementary pathways that all ultimately work together to help kind of recreate that bio program of fasting. And that's what this kind of biomimetic discovery platform is really, really good for, is finding these molecules that have these synergistic effects with each other, because at the end of the day, they not only evolved within the human body to perform a specific function, right? But they all evolved together to exist in this environment of fasting and activate that bio program that gives you all these great benefits. So that's kind of, like one of the reasons why you have to be careful about what molecules go together, and why these 4 were really the synergistic ones. And then to your second point, which I am totally blanking on now.
Why haven't we figured this out sooner?
Why haven't we not figured this out sooner? Yeah. So, I mean, sometimes it's just a matter of like going out there and looking for stuff, right? There's so many ideas that you can have in science, and so many different avenues that you can go down. And like I said, even to us, this was kind of a surprise. We really set out to figure out what was going on in the human body during a fast, but we did not expect to find molecules that, when combined together, could recreate some of those benefits and kind of give this insight into how fasting may be exerting its great longevity and cellular health benefits. So sometimes it's like chocolate chip cookies, right? No one intended to invent chocolate chip cookies at the happy accident almost. And that's kind of what Mimio is for us too. It was like we were just scientists looking for answers, and we happened to find this really, really cool discovery at the end of it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's interesting. It's a very holistic approach to, instead of say, hey, take this individual ingredient that can do XYZ, it's like take these four things that work together and then you're going to get even more benefits from it. And I love that because it's just more rooted in human biology and nature. And I think that's really where we need to be moving in general with supplementations. So let's get into the ingredients because I realize we haven't talked about them yet. And I'm sure everyone is like, what is in Mimio? What are the four main ingredients? So can you walk us through them? I would love to just hear your take on each of them.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I'll start with probably the most well-known one, and that's nicotinamide. So nicotinamide is a precursor for NAD plus in the body. And NAD plus is really, really interesting because it's essentially one of your body's master like metabolic regulators. It's how your body essentially measures how much energy is around and how much energy it is contained within the cell. So the NAD plus to NADH ratio is kind of how that all fits together. And the more NAD plus you have, that's essentially a signal to your cells, to your body that there's not a lot of nutrients around. There's not a lot of energy for the cell to operate on. So when you have high levels of NAD plus, it helps to activate kind of these cellular fasting pathways. And the best known one is, the NAD SERT pathway. And that has this big holistic effect on gene expression, which helps to decrease, protein production, helps to deacetylate histones so that DNA transcription doesn't happen as often. Proteins aren't translated as often. So really helping to enhance metabolic efficiency and make sure that the cell isn't producing more than it needs to, and then it's not making mistakes when it does produce things. So we use nicotinamide essentially for that purpose to help stimulate the cells, like fasting sensing mechanisms and help to kind of, artificially, let's say, or naturally, probably a better word, enhance the levels of NAD plus to kind of get the cells into that fasting mode with just through supplementation. And it's been shown across multiple different clinical studies to have these really interesting effects, especially on health span. It's been shown to enhance brain health, heart health, muscle health, skin health. So just like really, really holistic benefits from nicotinamide. And the next one on the list is spermidine. Spermidine is really interesting as well. It's actually a breakdown product of arginine in the body, so just a normal amino acid. And what spermidine is really well known for is inducing autophagy. So autophagy is kind of this, cellular cleanup and repair mechanism that essentially, breaks down dysfunctional proteins and organelles and then replaces them with new ones. And it's really important in fasting because it essentially helps to not only get rid of things that aren't working or damaging mitochondria, for example, but then also break those things down into their constituent parts so then they can be used to create new functional versions of the proteins and the organelles. So it's kind of, like this master cellular regenerative process that can actually help return cells into a more, functional state and repair damage that's been done over time. And spermidine is just recently starting to become pretty well clinically studied. In the studies that have been done so far, there have been these really interesting effects of spermidine on enhancing cognition in folks with cognitive decline and dementia. So it's been really associated with longevity in, human epidemiological studies. So the higher intakes of spermidine you have, the better and longer lived these folks ended up being. And so the next two on the list are palmitoyl ethanolamide, which is always fun to say, PEA for short. And this one's actually one of my favorites because it has these really widespread benefits. So it's actually involved in the endocannabinoid system, and its mechanism of action is essentially going to neurons and helping to stimulate the secretion of anandamide, which is one of the body's bliss molecules, right? So because it's an endocannabinoid, it has very similar interactions with the body as CBD. So you can almost kind of think about it as your body's natural CBD. It produces these anti-inflammatory effects, these neuroprotective effects effects, helping to reduce neuroinflammation, and then also like really clinically studied, really clinically well validated for helping to relieve pain as well. And then also mood elevation. So it's been studied in, like depression and anxiety and schizophrenia, and has these really powerful effects on helping to, control all of these, neural pathways to promote that mood elevation effect, that pain relief effect. So helping cells kind of rest, relax, and recover. And then the last one on the list is oleoyl ethanolamide, which is really the tongue twister of the day. OEA. And OEA is really interesting too because it's a cousin molecule of palmitoyl ethanolamide. They're both ethanolamides, so they kind of act through similar pathways but have their own unique little entourage effects. And oleoyl ethanolamide is really well known for inducing these metabolic benefits. So it's part of the gut-brain axis where it actually stimulates satiety and suppresses appetite, essentially. And like new emerging evidence is actually showing that one of the ways that OEA works is actually by enhancing the secretion of GLP-1 from intestinal cells. So it's kind of like your body's natural Ozempic, and that it's enhancing GLP-1, it's reducing your appetite. It's been shown in clinical studies to help folks like with obesity lose weight, control appetite, increase beneficial microbiome species, promote fat-specific breakdown, and control a lot of these metabolic markers. So like glucose levels, insulin levels, triglyceride, and cholesterol levels. So kind of this master metabolic regulator and supercharger that really helps to create some of those same benefits that you would experience during fasting on the metabolic side of things.
Hello, it's Brittany here, and I've got something life-changing to share with you. Sleep is crucial for our productivity, well-being, and beauty, right? No one wants to wake up with dehydration lines and dark circles. That has definitely happened to me. Picture this. You wake up feeling refreshed, your skin is glowing, yes, get it. And those pesky dehydration lines and dark circles, they're nowhere in sight. Sounds like a dream, right? Well, I'm here to tell you that it's not only possible, but it's also within your reach. I used to struggle with falling asleep. There was a time when getting a good night's sleep felt like chasing unicorns, tossing and turning, waking up multiple times and feeling like a zombie the next day. Seriously, that happened to me for a long time until about 2019, 2020 when I started biohacking my sleep. But then recently it started happening again, and I actually uncovered the ultimate secret that's really been helping me, and that is magnesium breakthrough. It has completely transformed my sleep and got me sleeping so good again. So what's important to know is that not all magnesium supplements are created equal, so don't waste your time with over-the-counter options. Magnesium Breakthrough is the real deal. It combines 7 different forms of magnesium in a single capsule, giving you the full spectrum magnesium experience you need for optimal results. So here's my nightly routine that I've been doing. I take 2 capsules of Magnesium Breakthrough with water about an hour before bed. The effects are remarkable. I drift off faster and enjoy deeper, more rejuvenating sleep. And then when the morning comes, I wake up feeling refreshed, energized, and ready to conquer the day. And I wake up at 5 a.m., so I'm not messing around, okay? I need my good sleep. So say goodbye to restless nights and tired mornings and unlock your best sleep with Magnesium Breakthrough. Ready for my offer? Visit magbreakthrough.com/biohackingbrittany and enter the code biohackingbrittany for a discount. We love discounts. Remember, this offer is only available on this special website. So if you go to Bioptimizer's normal website, it's not going to happen. It's not there. So don't let sleepless nights hold you back any longer. That's magbreakthrough.com/biohackingbrittany. Use my discount code biohackingbrittany to save. Woo woo. And let me know how your sleep is going. Yeah, I feel like there's so many benefits.
It's crazy. We have problems with that, honestly. Like, we do so much, and there's so much clinical evidence behind the molecules as well that sometimes even we are like, what's the right benefit for people? But that's the great thing too, is that you can use it in so many different ways. We like to say like it's as versatile as Meryl Streep, right? Like if you plug it in somewhere, it's going to be good.
Yeah, it's going to help. Yeah, I love that. I think it's really interesting because I've taken some of these ingredients separately. And I know a lot of people listening have as well. So would you recommend that they essentially stop taking them separately and start taking something like Mimio just to be able to amplify the benefits? Because it just seems like it's so much smarter and way better bang for your buck than like all of these separate supplements all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've definitely done that analysis. So, like, number one, definitely there's an advantage to taking Mimio versus combining these things together on their own, specifically because the dosage that we're using in Mimio was the one that we identified, was the most effective from our pilot clinical study. So, what we did for that one was essentially we had people come in and eat a standardized breakfast alongside a placebo control and then tested their plasma functionalities like we had earlier. And then we had those same people come back after a washout period, eat that same standardized breakfast, but then with supplementation with the Mimio ingredients at different dosages. And essentially what we found was that when people ate the standardized breakfast on their own, there was this big loss of plasma functionality, right? So that's very, very typical of the postprandial, post-eating response. Essentially, you have all this foreign material that's coming into the system in the form of food, right? It's like kicking off these pro-inflammatory responses. You have all that, metabolic chaos of all the sugars and the fats and the proteins coming into the system that your body then has to deal with. So instead of their plasma essentially became pro-inflammatory, pro-oxidant, not cardioprotective. But when they ate that same meal, but with supplementation with Mimio, we were able to prevent all of that loss of function and then actually add gains of function on top of that mimicked what we saw during a 36-hour fast. So it was anti-inflammatory instead of pro-inflammatory, antioxidant instead of pro-oxidant, and was much better at cardioprotective ability as measured through cholesterol efflux capacity, which is essentially the plasma's ability to take cholesterol out of lipid-loaded macrophages and help to prevent arterial plaque formation. So like really, really cool acute effects. So taking Mimio with food at the dosages that we identified can be really beneficial for helping to avoid a lot of these negative impacts of eating and like give you these big metabolic health benefits alongside that. So taking them all together in the dosages that we've packaged them up in, that's kind of what we identified were the optimal dose to help induce those effects. And then from an actual price standpoint as well, if you tried to combine the Mimio ingredients together at their dosages on its own, like it would probably be around $200 a month. And even then, it wouldn't necessarily be the same formulation because the palmitoyl ethanolamide that we're using is actually ultramicronized PEA, which is the most bioavailable form. And we're the only producer that's actually selling that in the States right now. And then we're one of two companies that's actually selling oleoyl ethanolamide in the States right now. So it's like, number one, it's hard to recreate the formulation on your own, but then even then, you're not going to get the most bioavailable forms of the molecules themselves.
Yeah. And also, like, why would you want to recreate it yourself?
Oh, yeah,
There's like, I would never do that. I would be like, okay, I'm buying this supplement. You did it for me. Great. Like, but maybe some people would do that. But I just think it's easier and it saves time and money for everybody to just kind of like try Mimio themselves. But I think your product really matters because as somebody who loves fasting, I had so many negative impacts of it on my health when I was doing it too much. And so I have a lot of female listeners, and this has happened to a lot of the women I know in kind of this biohacking space, is they jumped on the bandwagon of intermittent fasting and then their sleep started to kind of get iffy and they stopped sleeping well. And then it was hormone irregulation. And so missed periods and fertility issues. And that's kind of what happened with me kind of. And so I really took a step back from intermittent fasting, even though I feel so good on it mentally. And when I intermittent fast, I'm like so much sharper at work and I get way more done. I just like couldn't justify the negative side effects of it for my health currently right now. So that's why it's awesome to see something like Mimio come out, because I'm like, okay, like I can take this in the morning with my water and eat maybe around like, let's say 9:30, 10 a.m. and not do a full, 16-hour fast, but still get some sort of cellular benefit. And so that's just really encouraging. I think that's why a lot of people are going to be very interested in Mimio, is because you just provide so many benefits that they might not be able to get themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, one of the great things about Mimio is that we've talked about essentially using it alongside food to, get the benefits of fasting, even when you're eating, control a lot of these metabolic health parameters. But then also, Mimio is great to be used as a fasting enhancer as well, right? Like you were saying, like if you're already doing these shorter term 16-8 fasts, right? When you look at the actual science behind fasting and where you kind of see the maximal longevity benefits and where fasting metabolism really kicks in, it doesn't really start happening until around at least that 24 hours of fasting mark. And that's because that's around the time that it takes your body to run through all of your stored carbohydrates, your glycogen stores, and then really switch over into ketone metabolism and like full blown fasting processes. And then alternate day fasting is kind of where you see the best lifespan extension data in the animal models. So that 36 hours of fasting mark, which is actually one of the reasons why we decided to study 36 hours of fasting in the first place. So since Mimio was designed to replicate what happens in the body during a 36-hour fast, it can really help to enhance a lot of the benefits that you're getting from your shorter term fasts, while also helping to make fasting itself easier, because we have those benefits on hunger suppression and mood elevation and this energizing effect, and even that discomfort relief from the PEA, right? That can help keep you happier, fuller, and more energetic while you're actually fasting, so you don't kind of have the ups and downs that can come along with the lifestyle.
Nice. I love that. So can you take, and I guess you can, I'm just thinking about this, like, can you take Mimio anytime throughout the day? Obviously, there's the benefit to take it fasting in the morning if you are fasting, or maybe at your first meal. But like, say you forget to take it, can you take it at dinner time? Or is it like, no, you might as well just wait till the next morning?
I mean, I would say, if you're doing fasting, typically if you want to use it with food, we suggest taking it with your first meal to kind of naturally extend your fast, whether that's an overnight fast or, that 16-8 style. The only reason why we sometimes tell people to maybe not take it at night is because it can have an energizing effect for folks. So, we don't want to disrupt sleep or anything like that. It's a very important part of health and longevity. So that would be the only thing. But yeah, you can use Mimio essentially anytime throughout the day and in a lot of different use cases with or without food, depending on like really what you're trying to do with it. If you're taking it with food, that's a lot about, minimizing the impacts of eating and helping to, keep that metabolic homeostasis. And whereas, taking it without food is great for really supercharging the benefits of the fast that you're doing.
Nice. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I like that you can actually feel the benefits when you take it right away. There's a lot of supplements out there that don't work like that. Like you might feel the difference, or you might notice a difference, say, in your blood biomarkers 3 months later or something, when you get tested. But it's rare to have something that, like, you take it, you can feel a difference in the morning within, let's say, an hour. But then it also has all of these compounding long-term benefits. And that's really exciting because, yeah, like you just get to really enjoy everything that comes from that. So do you recommend that people kind of just be on Mimio for the rest of their lives, or like, because there's so many benefits from it, right? I just wonder, I'm going to care about longevity tomorrow. I'm also going to care about longevity in 10 years. So do I just keep taking it? I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, like I plan to keep taking Mimio for the rest of my life, because that's really, with any longevity intervention, like the earlier you start it and the more consistent you are about it, that's when it's going to have the ability to produce the largest and the most outsized effects, right? And you see that in the literature all the time, is that when you initiate a longevity intervention at the early part of life, you get much better health span extension, much better lifespan extension than you do if you initiate it later in life, even though you can still get benefits from initiating it later in life. It's just you'll get the maximum benefits the more consistently and the earlier you start with it. But, to your point, we definitely wanted to provide people with a product that would actually, give them benefits on a day-to-day basis rather than just kind of like a lot of other longevity supplements that are much more like, I'm going to take it, it's going to be working underneath the surface, but I'm not really going to know or have that necessarily tangible impact on my day-to-day functionality. Whereas, I mean, honestly, we kind of got lucky again, that like serendipity of science, that PEA and OEA were like the molecules that we actually identified, and they also do have these more tangible effects you can feel.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And yeah, it's interesting. I mean, maybe I will be on it for the rest of my life. I wouldn't be surprised if that happens. But I think you're
right. With a discount code, we'll like lifetime, the lifetime member.
Lifetime member for the next 20 years, subscribe every month. No, I think that says a lot. But like you said, like a lot of healthy interventions really like matter. The earlier you start, the better. And the more you do it, the better in terms of sticking to it day in and day out. And it's like that with most things, right? Like it's like that with adequate sleep and not sitting a lot and getting enough water. The more you do it day in and day out, the more benefits you get from it. So I guess it totally makes sense that this is the same for this, like for your supplement. The other thing that I really like is that you are one of few brands that I have seen that have actually come out with more sustainable packaging. And I want to talk about this because I had someone in my DMs recently, she called out one of the other brands that I work with. And she's like, I love them, but they always send me like plastic bottles. And when I want to refill, it's like, they just send me another plastic bottle. And I don't want that. Like, I don't want to just keep using plastic bottle after plastic bottle. But yours, like for everyone watching, you have a metal container. And then when this runs out, you actually just have these like refillable pouches that you just pour right in. So why was this important for you to create it like this?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that when you're talking about, health and longevity, right? That's great on like on a human basis, on an individual basis, right? But like health and longevity doesn't mean all that much, like if you're not also taking care of the planet at the same time, right? Like we wanted to make sure that, what we were doing wasn't just good for people, but we weren't, causing this huge impact on the environmental scale. And like you said, the supplement industry especially has a big problem with, plastic waste, because almost all supplements come in these plastic jars, and we just didn't want to be a part of that. So that's why we really, from the get-go, we're like, we have to have a sustainable subscription system. So everything we have, from the mailers that you get to the welcome boxes, to the pouches, the travel tins, the kitchen canister, all of that is 100% either compostable or recyclable, reusable. And that was a really, really important part of it for us, so that when we're living to be 120 and in perfect health, right? Like the planet is still, there as well. We're not just existing in the fire and brimstone of a globally climate decimated world.
Are you tired of feeling out of sync with your body's natural rhythm? Do you struggle with menstrual cycle related issues like fatigue, mood swings, and bloating? If you're looking to optimize your health and well-being, look no further than the Ebb and Flow Cycle Guide. This comprehensive guide is designed to help you better understand and work with your menstrual cycle so you can improve your energy levels, reduce PMS symptoms, and gain a deeper understanding of your body. With in-depth information on each phase of the menstrual cycle, you'll learn how to adjust your diet, exercise routine, and self-care practices to better align with your body's needs. One of the biggest benefits of the Ebb and Flow Cycle Guide is its user-friendly format. The guide is easy to follow and provides clear instructions on how to optimize your health throughout each phase of your cycle. Plus, it's packed with valuable information and insights that you won't find anywhere else. So whether you're a seasoned biohacker or you're just starting out, the Ebb and Flow Cycle Guide is the perfect tool to help you optimize your health and live in harmony with your body's natural rhythm. And with my expertise and guidance, you can trust that you're getting the best information and advice available. So why wait? Head over to biohackingbrittany.com to get your copy of the Ebb and Flow Cycle Guide and start living your best life today. Yeah, no, I really love that because I just, again, it's just sustainable. And I love seeing this because I think you're raising the bar for other brands around you. And I would love to get to a point where all of my supplements come in pouches and I'm just like manually refilling them. But we're just not at that point yet. But it's just great to see an example like you guys. And even as a new company, you've like raised the bar for people who've been around for so long. So hopefully everyone can kind of do better in terms of the environment, in terms of, packaging around products.
Yeah,
So
and what I will say is that the industry is also making great strides, right? Like, we're lucky in the sense that, we took some time and definitely, thought through the system and developed it out, but the options were available for us. Whereas maybe 5 years ago, 10 years ago, they wouldn't have been there in the same way. We could use compostable pouches. We could find refillable canisters and compostable boxes and mailers. And I just don't think that would have existed before. And like, as the technologies progress, I hopefully agree with you that people will step their game up, and especially with retail options, because I think that's the big hurdle right now, is that you got to find shelf stability. But the technology is advancing, and I think that we're going to get there. And we're happy to be a part of the rising tide.
Yeah, I love that. So what is next for Mimio? What is coming down the pipeline? Anything that you can share with us? New products, new ideas, new studies, new clinical research?
Yeah, absolutely. So, kind of all of the above. So we mentioned that we have our pilot clinical study. We're just finishing the data analysis for that now and actually adding on some like new experimental analyses. So we'll have new data from that. And that paper should be wrapped up and published by, early 2024, probably the January, February mark, if all goes according to plan, which is great. We're also planning a larger scale clinical study of around 60 to 80 people with the final dosage of the Mimio formulation to really, fully assess its clinical capabilities. We actually want to compare it directly to fasting and, see how they stack up against each other. And then in that vein as well, we identified that there were these bioactive molecules, from that original data set that we screened through. But we also identified over 250 molecules that were also elevated during a fasting state that don't have any, literature results on them right now. So they could be very bioactive. They could be really beneficial for longevity. They could have these synergistic activities like we found with our first 4 molecules. So on the back end, we're also doing, research into these new molecules so that we can, continue to create novel and unique compounds that are actually, derived from human biology that can have these like immediately applicable like impacts on human health and help to extend our longevity, extend our health span. So that's kind of the research that we're doing on the back end. And then, really far down the future, Mimio, we want it to be the biomimetic human health company. So in the same way that we ran this process with fasting to identify these really interesting clinically derived health molecules, you can do that with other regenerative states in the body, like exercise, like, sleep, like meditation or cold exposure, and just study what's happening in the body, see what's causing these benefits, and try to find a way to recreate them. So that's in the pipeline, not like the next step, but that's what we want to be in the future.
Yeah, that's so interesting. Imagine like taking a supplement that is like sleeping in a pill or cold exposure in a pill. Like what a crazy, I can't even like wrap my head around that. That's just wild. But very exciting, very exciting.
We started off with fasting, the easy one, right?
Yeah. And that's also wild that there's 250 different molecules that you notice that are elevated during fasting. That's significant. And also, do we even want to take a supplement that has 250 ingredients in it? You know what I mean? It's a lot.
Yeah, it's very, very interesting. And I think that there's definitely a lot of great potential in it, right? That combining these things together, like the closer that you get to biological complexity, that's really where you're going to see the biggest impacts. Because when you look at how all of the human health pathways like fit together and interact with each other and interweave, it's immensely complicated, right? And there's just like all these different like activation points and leverage spots and balances and counterbalances. So the typical pharma style approach of, one molecule, one target, then we fiddle with that, and then we kind of like see what happens, can really end up throwing the rest of the system out of whack. And that's why a lot of like pharma interventions have this long list of side effects, right? Because you're really overstimulating one pathway that then kind of gums up the works for a lot of other things, even though it's, doing the job that it was designed to do. So when using these, synergistic combinations of human molecules and these like large stacks to really replicate the biological complexity that's already happening inside of us, you can get a lot more of these, dialed in, nuanced, and powerful effects while also helping to maintain the actual biological homeostasis without triggering all these weird side effects that can also happen.
Nice. I love that. So it's not necessarily just like a quick fix. It's just supporting the state that you were researching, like fasting, for example. And right. I think that's a smart way to go about it, because there's a lot of criticism towards pharmaceuticals and even supplements, like singular supplements, for just being some sort of quick fix without really looking at the complexity of human biology.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, that's a big problem with a lot of the supplement formulations that are out there right now, right? Is that they're combinations of molecules that, while they have been individually studied, have not been very well studied together yet. And that's, I think, one of the advantages of Mimio's biomimetic approach is that, again, these molecules, they evolved within the human body and they evolved together to perform a specific function and activate these complementary pathways. And we've actually studied and shown that in human cells in a clinical study that these molecules do work together. And then of course we're gonna do even more clinical studies to make sure that's even more true and find out all of the capabilities of the molecules and all the indications that we can help with.
Nice. I love that. And I love that you are so rooted in continuing to do research in this space. Yeah. Because there's a lot of brands that don't do that, right? Like they just sell like vitamin C or whatever it is. And they're like, oh yeah, there's this research, but they're not actually continuing to move the field of research forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, me coming from my science background, right? PhD in nutritional biochemistry, research is just ingrained into who I am as a person. And I want to know, okay, what's the next cool thing that the molecules can do? Like, what's the capabilities of this, new molecule that we found from that data set? Is there something better out there? Because I'm very much in the longevity space too, in the biohacking space, where I'm like, let me chase this optimization. Let me find like the next ingredient that's going to make this, transformative and even better. So I couldn't help it, right? I wouldn't be out here just being like, well, I can rest on my laurels now. I'm going to be like, nope, next new thing. Let's go. More stuff, more data.
Nice. I love that. I think that's so important. And it just fits so well into the biohacking world. It really does, because biohackers very much care about research. They very much care about looking at things from a systemic, holistic standpoint and optimization standpoint, like you said. Yes. Yeah, exactly. So if people want to order Mimio or follow you, check out your content, anything like that, where can they go?
Yeah, so to order Mimio, you can head on down to mimiohealth.com and find information there. You can see our clinical studies. You can see the clinical studies for the ingredients themselves that back up the clinical claims that we're making and all these great biological effects that the molecules have. And if you want to follow me specifically, I'm on TikTok at That Nutrition Doctor DR. So That Nutrition DR. That's me. You can also follow Mimio Health at Mimio Health, right? Nice. on pretty much all the channels.
Perfect. I will link all of that in the show notes so everyone can find you very easily. And thank you so much for coming on the podcast. This was awesome. I learned a lot, and I know everyone will definitely learn a lot as well.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Brittany. This was really fun.
Thanks for listening to another episode of Biohacking with Brittany. If you're interested in finding the show notes or the sponsors for this episode, you can do so on my website, which is biohackingbrittany.com. Remember to follow me on Instagram, where I'm most active. My handle is @biohackingbrittany. And if you're interested in working together and you want to email me directly, you can do that. My email is info@biohackingbrittany.com. And I look forward to hearing from you and having you tune in next week.